It was really easy for me to be like, I'm the global head of business operations, but then to have to go and say, I'm a yoga teacher. The identity shift was really real and really hard.
Maybe a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation about finances.
This was probably the most challenging part of it for me in my journey, because at the time, my partner had been supporting me towards moving towards a C-level. That was my career goal. I was the breadwinner in the family. I held the stability. I don't think I've ever felt more scared in my life because I knew I had to make the decision. I just didn't know how it was going to all map out.
How much do you regret quitting your 9 to 5 from 0 to 10?
0. I feel like before I decided to quit, I don't know that I knew myself that well, actually. That first year was probably one of the hardest years of my life. I don't think I realized how much I tied my self-worth and my value to the title that I had. I grew up in the world of Instagram coaches where somebody just woke up one day and said, I'm a coach. So there's an element of being embarrassed that I was moving into coaching because I was like, I didn't want to be seen like that.
Thank you so much, Jen, for joining us today on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I'm super excited for the conversation. Before we get started, I'd love to ask you one question. At this point in time, how much do you regret quitting your 9 to 5 from 0 to 10? 0 is the best decision of your life.
Probably a 0.
How come?
You know, I feel like before I decided to quit, I don't know that I knew myself that well, actually. You know, like I'd always been someone that thought I knew myself really well. And I feel like just over the last 3 years, I've learned so much about myself. And also, you know, before I had quit, I was so hyper independent in almost a bad way and to a fault. And I just think I've learned so much over the last 3 years since I've been doing this that it's just, I don't know, I feel like a completely different person. And I don't know that I would have had that had I not made that decision.
Yeah.
Everything is better because of it. It's probably a better way to put it.
Oh, I love that. And I love to dive into your 3 years of learning. Can you just give us a quick overview of your journey so far? I believe you're an accountant and then to quitting your job 3 years ago and to what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I started my career as an accountant. So I worked in public accounting. I worked at Grant Thornton for a couple of years, and I went into a small accounting firm, and then finally realized that maybe it was accounting, maybe it was public accounting that I didn't love. So then I moved into industry. I worked for a travel company for a while. Loved that. Worked with an amazing team there. Eventually found myself in tech. And so that was just like a rocket ship ride. It was so amazing. We scaled a startup 40 to 400. It was a global IT consulting firm doing cloud. And it was just amazing. And during the pandemic, that startup was acquired by a really big company. And about a year into that, I knew that wasn't the path for me anymore. I didn't really love what I was doing anymore. And also during the pandemic, I had started a project with my partner where we started a YouTube channel. And so it was how we kind of kept our sanity over the pandemic. So we we lived in Toronto at the time. And so we were like going to different parks. I was teaching yoga. He was doing all the behind the scenes stuff. And that was kind of the first time that I had ever done something outside of my career like that. I had always been so hyper focused on sort of building and scaling my career as fast as possible. And so that was kind of the first time that I was doing something for no other purpose than just for the fun of it. And anyways, so then when I found myself at this crossroads, I ended up quitting my job and started doing yoga full time. I took the community that I built on YouTube, turned it into a business, was teaching yoga, did some wellness programs. And then probably about a year into that, I had this moment where as much as I love the wellness side of it and the yoga, I felt like I wasn't intellectually stimulated enough. I really needed something a little bit more that I could bite my teeth into. I had talked to a lot of different people. They suggested I check out professional coaching. I found myself on that journey and have pivoted my business entirely from yoga to more coaching. And so now I work with organizations and individuals, and I do a lot of leadership coaching. I really work with a lot of people that try to find that sort of, I don't know, balance. I hate that word, but that balance, that coexistence between their ambition and sort of like their well-being and what they want to do and success, and sort of redefining all of that.
You did so many things over the past 3 years, and I can relate so much to that because I'm also a person where I just need multiple things going on at the same time, where things could get boring over time and then you pivot. I'd love to know what inspired you to start a YouTube channel in the first place, and why yoga? Were you already certified?
No, so I was not certified. So why yoga? So, it's really interesting. So I think it was September 2011 is when I started my first job at Grant Thornton. And I also went to my first hot yoga class. And so I always say this is the point where I started feeling like I was two different people. There was this like yoga loving hippie wanting to just travel the world sort of person, and then there was like corporate Jen who just like was super ambitious and prioritized her career and just was the accountant and all those things. And so it always been a big dream of mine to teach yoga. And so I think my partner was just getting so tired of me saying, one day I'm going to be a yoga teacher. This is my big dream. And so he had really wanted to start a YouTube channel. He just didn't want to do it by himself. And so his pitch to me was like, you've been saying this, that you've been wanting to do this. So like, why not now? Like, just start teaching. You've been practicing so long that even if you're not certified, like, enough about it that we could at least do a YouTube channel. And then if you wanted to, I can always get certified after. And so that was what I did. We kind of started it, and then I eventually got certified.
Wow. Just start. Like, I feel like it's a common theme in so many of my past episodes as well, is don't overthink and just start and see where you go. And like your journey, you started as yoga instructor on YouTube, but that's not where you ended up. You ended up finding what you actually enjoy the most. I want to go back a little bit actually to your transition from corporate to startup. How did you like about that transition? Like, what was different? And when the startup got acquired, did you feel like any of your work scope has changed?
I love startup world because I think when you're somebody that is really ambitious and also you're someone that gets bored really easily, it really kind of itches those two things because, if a startup's scaling pretty fast, then it's just like every day is so different. Every month is so different. I think it was Harley from Shopify that said, when you're in like that heavy growth period, then the people that are working there, so if let's say your revenue is increasing by 50% that year, then, the skills capacity of your people also need to be expanding to that 50%. And so that was my experience. I mean, I changed roles, I think every 6 months I was getting promoted. Also, just the scope of the work was changing. We were adding new regions, more complex problems. So it was a really, really exciting time. Now, the other thing though that I know about startup culture is like, there's a bit of like a toxic hustle maybe with it. Where it's just you've drunk the Kool-Aid, and so now you're working 7 days a week and all-nighters, and you're not sleeping anymore, and you're not going to the gym anymore, and you're just like living at the office or thinking about it, or it just becomes this like state of being. And so that's a bit of the unhealthy side of it. And so it's actually one of the reasons why I do a lot of leadership coaching now, because I think, the clearer we are as leaders, the more we understand ourselves, the more that we can prevent a lot of those things. So yeah, there's kind of like the good and the bad, I would say, with startup, but overall, there's just this like amazing energy that comes with it that I don't know, I'm really in love with.
Do you think working at a startup changed your corporate mindset a little bit and eventually push you to do this entrepreneurship yourself? Or did you feel like it was more of an intrinsic motivation to quit your job and start YouTube full time?
Yeah. So, you know what? My dad's an entrepreneur. So, from an early age, I guess like I maybe didn't fully respect the entrepreneur journey that he had been on, but I was there was always something there that I found really fascinating about it. And so, when I was young, I used to work for my dad, like even in high school and stuff like that. So I feel like I was all like, in a lot of the work that I was doing, even when I was in corporate, the companies that I worked for were very startup-y like. they really valued a lot of entrepreneurial spirit. And when I say that, I'm maybe canceling out my public accounting days a little bit. Although I will say that even the public accounting firms that I worked for, they didn't love status quo. Like they wanted, for you to be able to think a little bit outside the box, for you to be able to change processes and stuff. So that's always been a really big part, I think, of the companies that I was lucky enough to work in. And so I always had that knack. And also, one of my detriments is that I always had that owner mindset. So like, it didn't matter what role I was in, I was always working my ass off. Like I worked too hard. I cared too much. And so I think for me, what had happened was I always knew that my end goal was I wanted to build something of my own. I just didn't know what that would actually be. So, and so I think when I hit that point, it was just like the question that kept popping up in my mind is like, if I don't do it now, then when am I going to do it? Because I keep saying I want to do this thing, but I'm not doing anything about it.
I want to get the timeline right. How deep into your YouTube career did you quit your 9 to 5?
Yeah, let me think. Probably. So we started the YouTube channel, I think in June of 2021. And I think I quit in February of 2022.
And how big was your YouTube channel? Were you already making money off of your YouTube channel?
So I think we had like 3,000, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 subscribers. We had, I think, so at the time, I don't know if it's still the same, but you had to have 4,000 watch hours and you had to have over 1,000 subscribers to start monetizing. And it was around the time where all the shorts were starting to come out too. And so I think and they weren't counting any hours of shorts towards your hours. And so I think we hit like, I don't know, I think we were like just over halfway of the watch hours, but we had hit the subscriber count. So by the time we kind of gave up on the channel, I think had we kept going, we would have been able to monetize it. But we just kind of burnt out from that.
Yeah, I understand completely. YouTube is definitely a grind. Like I mainly do short form content, but when I try to push out YouTube video once a week, it's so much more work than a short form piece of video. I mean, short form is still a lot of work, couple of hours for a video, but YouTube is like a day or two or even longer for a video. Definitely a full-time production.
Yeah, and I don't think people fully appreciate that when they're, starting as a YouTube content creator or even consuming it.
Definitely. Yeah. So maybe a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation about finances. So when you quit, then can you tell us a little bit more about sort of your situation, maybe with your partner? Was he holding down a steady job? How did you guys talk about finances with, no income on the side? Did you save a significant amount for a runway?
So this was probably the most challenging part of it for me and my journey, because at the time Dave, my partner Dave, had been supporting me towards moving towards a C-level. That was sort of my career goal. And so we were like on this path. And so, I was the breadwinner in the family. I held the stability in terms of, so Dave works in sheet metal. And so sometimes in sheet metal, it's very building and project specific. So sometimes what'll happen is he might be really good for a year or two or even 6 months. But then if a building slows down or finishes or something like that, sometimes there's lags between work. And so sometimes he'll be off for 6 months and then be back. So it's like, it's stable yet unstable at the same time. And so I really created that stability because I was 9 to 5. I had my payroll coming in every other week. I was making more and more money every year. And so there's a little bit of that. And so I just remember this moment when I knew internally that I needed to make this decision. And it was probably the scariest. I don't think I've ever felt more scared in my life because I knew I had to make the decision. I just didn't know how it was going to all map out. And so I basically started with me sitting down with Dave and saying, Dave, this is something I want to do. And I just remember his face was like, oh my God, like, what are we going to do? That was his first like immediate reaction, but then his second reaction was like, okay, like, this is really scary, but I know we're going to figure it out. And he's like, if this is really what you want to do, then I'll do everything I can to support you. So as I started having kind of conversations about it, I was getting more confident about the decision and figuring out what it would look like. So it wasn't just like I made the decision and quit. It was like, okay, I made this decision. Now I'm going to talk to Dave about it. And then we had to have a real conversation about, what does this mean for our finances? Because we had a mortgage, we still have a mortgage. We have all these bills now, we're in our mid 30s. So life looks very different than it did in our early 20s where we were just renting and all the things. And so there was a real concern around like, how do we keep holding on to all these things that we've built and that we want to keep having, and also like a certain lifestyle. And so anyway, so that was kind of scary to sort of navigate it. But basically what we figured out was what our sort of like minimum amount of money that I would have to bring in that we could kind of manage on. And then the second thing we did was, okay, so now I need to figure out, how am I going to make sure I bring in that kind of money if I want to quit this job and sort of go either more full-time or at least somewhat part-time in my business, so that I'm not just full-time in this kind of corporate role. So then I started talking to a lot of people. I talked to my dad about it. I talked to there's a couple contract, like consultant gigs that I had lined up that were maybe opportunities. And I was even thinking about going part-time in my current role because I had been working at the company long enough and I was a valuable enough asset that, even shifting my hours would have been fine. And so really I started just exploring like, what are my options here? So like, what do I want to do? And it ended up being that one of the best options was my dad wanted a little bit of help in his business. And so that's kind of how we made it work, is he was like, hey, if you can help me, then, I don't mind kind of like supporting you guys on this crazy journey that you want to do. Also, because he's an entrepreneur, so he kind of knows the wave of it. And so once we kind of had that all mapped out, and I'll also say I was also talking to my employer about some of this. So I know not everybody is in that position to be able to do so, but if you are, like, I know for me, I had a really great relationship with the CEO at the time. So he knew it was coming, and we were talking all the time about what this would look like and how we were going to structure it and what the leeway would be when I leave. And so, yeah, so once I was really clear on what I wanted to do and kind of how that was going to work out, then I formally made the decision, put in my resignation, and then that was it.
It's a very interesting journey for sure. I have like a little bit of a different experience I had a mentor from my startup that I work for, and actually was a little bit blindsided when I was telling my mentor that I was applying to other jobs and sort of testing out the market. So I'm definitely very glad to hear that you had that experience with your CEO. So when you started to shift away from your corporate Jenn identity, did you feel like any sort of emotional toll? Did you feel like you lost a part of you? Did you have a period of grieving?
Oh my gosh, that first year was probably one of the hardest years of my life, because I don't think I realized how much I tied my self-worth and my value to the title that I had, to the job that I was doing, to being super clear about what was happening. And so, yeah, it was horrible, because I remember a lot of my coworkers and a lot of people in my community were so excited for me to make the shift. And what I realized was I had a really hard time showing up and, going from, hey, I'm like, it was so easy for me to be, at the time I was the global head of business operations. It was really easy for me to be like, I'm the global head of business operations. But then to have to go and say, I'm a yoga teacher. For some reason, that transition felt really weird to me, because, here I'd held these really powerful roles. I was on this very powerful, trajectory. And it just, the identity shift was really real and really hard. And I didn't know how to show up in the same capacity that I was used to. So it took me a really long time to get really comfortable with what I was doing, get comfortable with my trajectory as an entrepreneur, and to just sort of like let go of all of those, I don't know, more traditional status symbols, I guess.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the strategies that you used to cope with this identity shift?
Ooh, probably one is I spent a lot of time by myself. It's almost like hibernation or hiding. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the best strategy, but for me, it was like I needed to get really comfortable with myself so that I could kind of show back in the world or be in community again. And so part of it was just I spent a lot of time just with myself. Now, one of the things that I haven't mentioned on this podcast yet is I was also really burnt out, and I didn't know that. I only realized that a year ago. And so, as I was, coming out of this corporate and, reestablishing my identity again and figuring out who I wanted to be, I was also dealing with burnout and I had moved. So there's a lot of different like transitional pieces that sort of went alongside this. And so part of it was just, I needed to hibernate a little bit. I needed to kind of get away from all of the external noise because so many people had opinions about what I was doing. And so it just felt nice to sort of just be in my own energy for a little bit. So that was one of them. I also did a lot of yoga. I did a lot of meditation. So restorative yoga was one of my saving graces. So really getting back into understanding my nervous system, starting to understand my body better, starting to just like really reconnect with myself again. And probably the last thing I would say is just letting people into the messiness of what was happening, because I think I'd spent so long having my shit together that it felt like it was the first time that I didn't have my shit together and I did not know what was really happening or where I was going. And so I think just starting to let some key people into that so that they, could support me in that messiness of it.
Yeah, I love that. Moving past the moment that I decided you wanted to quit, I would love to know how you transitioned from that period of I don't know what I'm doing to feeling like you're going into a groove of doing this whole entrepreneurship and figuring it out.
There was a real big time where I felt like I was floundering. Like it felt like I was trying a lot of different things. It was definitely a big phase of experimentation, I think, because something that was so important to me as I was building this business is I wanted it to feel aligned. Like I didn't quit this amazing career to just do whatever, something that felt really fulfilling, something that I love doing, something that I could really stand behind and put my energy behind and that I could see a real vision for. So I was very clear on what I was looking for. I just didn't know what I was looking for, if that makes any sense. And so there was a lot of like floundering of like testing stuff out, seeing what I liked, seeing what I didn't like, really paying attention to my energy. And then there's also a component of like, can I make money at this? Like realistically, do I see a sustainable business model through this? Like, can I actually build this into a business that makes money and isn't just like a non-for-profit or just, a side hustle? So there's a lot of different conflicting things going on during that period. And so I think for the first time when I saw it all starting to come together was when I did fundamentals with Coactive, which is the coaching school that I did. And so that was the first time where it felt like, oh, okay. I see how, my corporate experience, my wellness experience can kind of all tie back into this like thread of coaching. And so as I started to get more into like the professional coaching sphere, basically it was just like, I finally saw that path where I was like, okay, I can see how I can make money at this. I can see sort of like the boundaries, and it gave me more confidence that these were real things that people did. And it kind of tied all my worlds together. So once I kind of had that became more of the North Star. And I feel like it all started coming together a lot more with then, but still way slower than I expected.
The Coactive School, is that a course that you studied?
Yeah. So Coactive is the Coactive Training Institute. And so they're one of the premier coaching institutes for coaching. And so they develop really, really amazing professional coaches. And so basically what they have is they have a very intense training program. So it's like, first is like fundamentals. Then you have 4 courses that you need to do. And then if you want to get certified by them, it's like a 6-month certification journey to get that.
Wow.
It's like going back to school.
Yeah, I know. I'm actually also going through the same thing right now where I'm taking a lesson or taking a course from another creator on content creation. And it really allowed me to see the business side of content creation rather than just sharing my life randomly and really have like a system in place. And for the longest time, I resisted so much to taking somebody else's courses because I know I have my courses, and sometimes I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, even though the feedback is amazing. Like people feel that they really learn a lot, but I it's just putting myself in other people's shoes. Maybe they don't know what they're doing either, but they really do. Like I really learned so much from their courses. And I think that's something that I wish I did sooner if in my full-time content creator entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is the case for you, but I feel like, I feel like when we become entrepreneurs, it's like, oh no, now I need to know everything. And everyone expects me to know everything. And so like it's really easy. I know for me, it was like putting up armor. Like, yeah, I know what I'm still talking about, even though this is a brand new career and I have no idea what I'm doing, but no, trust me. And so I feel like it's taken the last couple of years to start like unleashing that or taking off that armor and being like, I actually don't have it all figured out. I'm just running around with my head cut off like everybody else.
Yeah. And sometimes it's also letting your ego go and not letting your ego go over your head, right? It's knowing that you don't know everything and you just have to constantly be learning and upskilling, whatever it is. What inspired you to go back to school? How did you, I know you talked to your friends about it, but what clicked in your head when you decided you wanted to switch to coaching?
I think part of it was, I had been teaching yoga. I started doing some wellness programs. And I liked the wellness programs, but something was really missing for me there where I felt like a little bit of a fraud. Like here I am sort of coaching based off of the knowledge that I know, but even though I had full programs, the engagement felt a little bit low. I was really questioning whether people were getting value out of them. And I was also just questioning, like, is this who I want to show up as? Like, do I feel good about like where my reputation is going with this? Because, I'd spent so long really caring about my reputation, and then going into entrepreneurship is just like such a weird journey. And so there's just like a lot of big questions that I had where I'm like, can I really stand in what I'm doing? Like, do I know that I'm doing a good job? And I felt like I didn't know if I was doing a good job. And so, yeah, so I think for me, going back to school was kind of like, okay, like if I want to be a serious professional in this, coming from a CPA background and stuff, having that kind of designation was always really helpful because it kind of like gave you boundaries that, kind of told you the rules a little bit. And I guess, as an accountant, maybe I like the rules a little bit. And so when I was thinking about it, it was just like, okay, like if I want to move in this direction, then I want to be seen as a professional and I want to know if I'm doing a good job or not. Like I want something to be able to create some structure and some boundaries for me so that I know, like, how do I show up as a professional coach? Like, what does that actually mean to do that? How do you hold the space in a way that's aligned with those kinds of things? And how can I be with other people that also take this work really seriously? Because, I also, as I was building my business, I grew up in the world of like Instagram coaches where, somebody just woke up one day and said, I'm a coach, and so there's an element also of being embarrassed that I was moving into coaching because I was like, I didn't want to be seen like that. And so, yeah, so there's like a lot of mixed things going on there.
That's very interesting. How did you get over that? I mean, I think it's a perfect fit for you because you came from that trajectory of to like C-level. You came from a lot of business experience and expanding the startup from 40 to 400. But it's interesting that you still feel that way, like that you're a fraud, even though you have so much going on, like you have so much under your belt. I don't really have a question there. I just find that super fascinating.
Yeah. And you know what? Part of it too is like, I think part of it is I look really young. I get mixed up all the time for being like, hey, you're 16 years old. And I'm like, I am 35. And so there's, I think, a little bit of that. But it always, and I think everybody has it. There's like little bits of just something that has you. And I think as women too, we struggle with this, but there's like that imposter syndrome a little bit, right? Of just never feeling like you're good enough or never feeling like you have the right knowledge or whatever. But you're right. Like the running joke in my family is like, Jen, how many letters are you going to have after your name? Like by the time you die, like there's going to be a paragraph.
Let's talk about your business now. How are you finding your clients now?
Yeah. So now I would say my business is very relationship based. So I would say most of my clients I know. I don't know that I've I ever really get clients that I haven't met before that just drop in. Typically, there's some kind of relationship there, or it's a referral, or, some kind of a connection like that. And so for me, that feels really aligned too. I'm definitely a connection-based person. I love building relationships and stuff like that. So that has been a really big shift, because I know when I started my business, I didn't realize it was going to be so relationship based. I really tried to keep that disconnect, that sort of bridge of like, oh, but I'm this super professional kind of, business. And I realized that for me and for where I was going with things, it didn't work. So it's a lot of relationship building. And where my business is now is, bless you.
Thank you.
Where my business is now is I work with a lot of individuals, and then I also work with organizations. So over the last year, I've really been focusing on supporting a lot more organizations. So being able to work with organizational change, leadership, building out leadership development programs, doing, like one-on-one coaching with their executives and their leaders. And then I kind of do the same thing on the individual side. So just supporting individuals on that. Now, the individual side is a little more fluid. So I bring in a lot of different things like yoga or energy work or things like that into my individual coaching. But yeah, so that's kind of where things are at now.
And what's next for you?
What's next is I really want to do a lot more organizational work. So just like really starting to, I want both, to be honest. I need both because I get bored quickly. So like both are really great because I find them both so fascinating, and they both kind of have their own challenges and complexities. And so I want to just keep double downing on all of these. Right now, I have training as a professional coach. I'm an ACC level, so I'm actually working on my next step, which is the PCC level. So that's 500 coaching hours, doing more leadership and development work. I really want to support organizational health. So how do we make healthier workplaces? Because a lot of them just aren't. People aren't engaged. There's quiet quitting happening. There's all these things happening. The way I see it, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be so much easier. So there's a bit of that. Like I wish people didn't have to quit their 9 to 5 to love work. Like I wish it felt like a better option. Like, I could build my own thing because I love that. Or it could be I stay in my work because I love that, not feeling like it has to be an or feeling like, you're choosing your health or you're choosing, yourself and fulfillment over those things. So there's a bit of that I really would love to see a change in organizations. And then just continuing to support people on the individual side, because I just love that. And so I will probably continue to study and learn more about it. I'd love to do stuff in team coaching. I would love to, team coaching is probably next.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone in their corporate job, and maybe you're thinking about taking that leap and wondering what's out there for them? What advice do you have for those people?
Yeah, I would just tell them to talk to people, talk to whoever they can. If they're not able to talk to their current workplace about it because they don't want to get blindsided, you don't want to do that. But maybe it's family, or maybe it's their best friends, starting to network more with other people, reconnect with old coworkers, just talk to people about what they're thinking or what they might be thinking, because I think the more you talk about it, the more clear you get too on what you actually want and where you want to go. And in hindsight, one of the things that I wish, had I known I was going to do coaching, I wish I would have stayed in corporate a little longer to pay for that coaching school. That would have been nice. So the other thing that I always tell people too is just if they kind of have a bit of an idea of where they want to go, so like really map it out. Like what kind of education do they think they might want or need for it? How do they build credibility in that space? Things like that, because I think if you have an idea of what all that costs and what all that's going to be like, then I think it just makes it so much easier when you're actually in it.
Yeah, definitely have a plan at the beginning and be okay if it changes and be okay if it doesn't. Yeah,
exactly.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jenn.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. It was amazing.